maintaining energy and momentum. So the idea is, after you've done your transformation, how do you make sure the transformation benefits and efforts and activities and solutions continue, because they definitely have an opportunity to fall apart if you don't, care for them and continue to promote them, let alone improve them. So trying to maintain improvement momentum and even just sustaining is important. Right, so let's talk about revolution and evolution. Kotter's principles of dual operating systems. Like, do you want a revolution or an evolution? And sometimes one may be better than the other, depends on the circumstances. In general, many people driving important change and from everywhere. There's not just the usual few appointees. So there's a lot of different people trying to make changes across the organization. How do you get a get to mindset, not a have to one? In other words, you want people to be motivated and to drive themselves rather than being forced to do things. They tend to work more efficiently and happier if they kind of own and feel ownership and want to, move towards whatever the transformation is. Action that is head and heart driven. That comes up on the quiz, by the way, not just head driven. I think I've mentioned a few times the best manager I ever had in my career was an individual that really mastered that idea. He really got people in his team to feel in their hearts that, the objectives of the organization are something they just have to do, not because they were told to, but because they just felt it in their hearts that this is something they wanted to do. It became kind of a compelling personal need. And that really drove the organization to higher levels of performance consistently. Much more about leadership rather than management. The difference being that your leaders are more of the type to set visions, encourage people, but not try to, manage the details of what people are doing. I think we've talked about that many times over the previous modules. It requires an inseparable partnership between the hierarchy and the network, not just an enhanced hierarchy or an enhanced network for that matter, right? So you're going to have, especially in large organizations, there will be some hierarchy, and there's also going to be a need to network across them. So how do you optimize and balance all of that and keep that balanced as you go along? The second part of this idea, psychologists assert that the behaviors are primarily driven by experience or past events rather than what future they may hold. So we're very much, influenced by what we experienced or learned in the past. You really need to make sure that you can frame anything that you're trying to accomplish in the context of where has the organization been, what's your current state, what are you trying to accomplish? So what do the answers to these questions mean about where you're going? What your future state, you're trying to sell the future state as a manager. Where managing is about organizing, coordinating, and telling or instructing or demanding in some cases. Leading is about inspiring, enabling, and co-creating. So co-creation as kind of a servant leader, I would say, is another important, idea. Okay. You're in a business case, you're constantly going to have to justify a return on investment. Even though you may think as the leader of the DevOps transformation that the most important thing the company should be doing is DevOps, guess what? There's going to be a lot of other things that the same organization is trying to do at the same time, different kinds of initiatives. So your return on investment needs to, be competitive with all of the other activities and initiatives going on across the organization. I've been through this process many, many times with my clients. I can tell you many war stories about, what worked and what didn't work in terms of ROI when you're faced with, from some pretty smart business leaders, especially chief financial officers or the like, where they're really good at analyzing business cases and detecting what's real and what's not. There's a lot of artificial, benefits that are hard to really get down to justifying when you get down to it. So there's some hard gains, the real quantifiable gains. And certainly I would agree this first bullet when it comes to DevOps is generally the one that sells the most, right? What are you going to get by accelerating time to value? Reducing cost, improved revenue, because you're able to get things done faster, which not only gets more product out the door, but also reduces the cost, because there's the major cost factor typically is labor. And by reducing the amount of time things take, you're going to have less labor amortized over the large organizations. It can be a massive amount of cost when you add it up over an investment period, which is typically like 3 to 5 years. So improvements are going to allow more to be done at the same time. The reduction in cost of failures as well. So the cost of failures, if you look at the cost of a failure in production versus the cost of a failure that's found and fixed prior to production, there's a major difference. So the more you can accelerate the avoidance of failures in production, there's a lot of cost reduction there. So in addition to those kind of hard gains, which generally are pretty well accepted by the people that are reviewing business cases, there's a lot of other things that are perhaps a little harder to make hard justifications, but certainly they're very real and can also support the business case. So reducing the risk of failure and inconsistencies. Customer satisfaction is a little bit of an intangible, but clearly there's a real benefit there. Competitive advantage is a little bit hard to quantify sometimes, but there's a real advantage. And I would even put it the other way around. It's a competitive disadvantage if you aren't doing some of these things. You can call up industry data, looking at, let's say, the elites versus the mid-range versus the low performers, and you can see, the difference in terms of their business outcomes. So that one is maybe, again, not a hard gain, but certainly justifiable. Improve market perception as like an innovative company, and improve employee motivation is, again, the end result could be measured if you see a lot of attrition and so on, but in general, it's pretty clear that people enjoy working in organizations that have modern methodologies such as DevOps going on. Think back to the value stream mapping exercise. Where did you remove waste? How did you do it? What is the impact on cycle time and cost of delivery? So yeah, that's the one that I find is the dominant factor in business cases that I've been involved in that were successful in justifying a project for DevOps improvement. You do a benchmark with the current state value stream map, look at the timings, and then when you have the future state value stream map, you can estimate the savings in cycle time and lead time, not just cycle time, but overall lead time and the cost of delivery. You can look at the reduction in cost as the reduction in labor costs to get the same work out the door. And it adds up remarkably very quickly, especially, again, when you're amortizing it over an investment period of 3 to 5 years and the whole team. And that's very real savings. Now, what the company does with those savings is outside the scope of the return on investment analysis, right? Somebody might say, well, we're going to take those savings and, reduce the staff. That's a possibility. Or they could take the savings and invest in new products. But both of those have benefits from the business point of view.